As he takes his last breaths, our protagonist cannot help but look up into the eyes of his killers. A huge crowd has gathered to witness this spectacle as the royal family gives this man a final opportunity to showcase his magic abilities before he is finished off. He is only able to conjure up a tiny bolt of magic that burns out as soon as it touches the coat of his killer. Ripples of laughter are heard among the crowd as the member of the royal family then reminds our protagonist of his position as a commoner and how his abilities would forever be nothing more than the object of ridicule. He conjures up a ball of fire that sets the man ablaze soon as it comes into contact with his frail body. As the flames eat up every inch of his existence, our protagonist cannot help but marvel at the wonder of such powerful magic and wishes that he could have mastered it during his lifetime as well. A cloud of smoke suddenly appears, and when our hero next opens his eyes, he is met by the sight of 3 huge women who are all wearing maid outfits. His first thought is that he has been abducted by giants, but when he catches sight of his tiny hands, he realizes that reality is even more strange. He flings his minuscule hand to one side and a strong bolt of energy is released out of it that destroys the roof of the castle, where he is born. Meanwhile, the citizens outside are celebrating the birth of the 7th prince of the royal family, Prince Lloyd. Years pass and Lloyd is now a young boy, barely 10 years old. His mischievous nature is no different than any other boy who has not yet experienced maturity. Having escaped the clutches of the maids of the castle, he is approached by a few members of royalty who ask him if he would join them for a hunt. However, before they can receive an answer, he has already disappeared downstairs. They discuss how he had always been a rather strange child, having learned to read while he was still a toddler and even rejecting breast milk. Rumor has it that he is the reincarnation of a very strong and famous magician who died years before his birth. Lloyd overhears the conversation and cannot help but smirk. He definitely is a reincarnation, but in his past life, he had been a commoner with no talents to speak of. And even though he has told nobody this, his memories are still intact. So now that he has all this knowledge at his disposal, he can finally discover magic to its true extent. Which is why, once he gained freedom from the maids, his first place of refuge is the palace library, which is stacked to the roof with books of every genre. However, he has just begun reading when one of the maids finally catches up with him. But fortunately for Lloyd, she is also his sparring partner. They go outside and begin to spar with wooden swords. The maid Silpha is really experienced, and initially their match is extremely one-sided, with Silpha using her superior height and strength to her advantage. However, Lloyd, who just wants to go back inside and read, uses control-type magic which allows him to mirror every technique that his opponent is using. When this does not have the intended result the boy was hoping for, he then starts levitating and even increases the length of his sword. Well aware that this would be classified as cheating, Lloyd has no qualms as long as he comes out on top. He then switches up his moves to catch Silpha out. But the girl is an experienced fighter and manages to block off his attack and return with a counter that sends the boy hurling away in defeat. Although she is aware that Lloyd was cheating, she actually begins fangirling about how he was able to use 2 abilities during combat, while the court magicians are only able to use 1, despite their superior age. Later that evening, Silpha takes the boy along with her to the palace bathhouse where all the maids are bathing together. Obviously, this is an embarrassing experience for our protagonist who still has the mind of a grown man inside of him. However, he manages to incur some benefit from this experience as the maids discuss a secret library hidden underneath the castle that contains books on extremely dangerous magic. Moreover, a demon that almost destroyed the town is also sealed down there to keep everyone safe. Obviously, such an opportunity could never be missed by Lloyd that night. He sneaks into the library by the help of an invisibility charm. The barrier on the door, which was said to be unbreakable and set up by really powerful mages, is destroyed within a matter of seconds by a mere boy. Lloyd has just entered the room when the demon known as Grimoire makes an appearance. He is clearly binded and begins requesting the boy to set him free and promises to provide him with ancient magic that is now forgotten. His eyes light up at this possibility, and he frees the demon, who immediately launches a powerful energy blast at Lloyd, which destroys the entire library. Thinking that he is now free, he begins planning what he would do next. However, when the dust clears, the boy is still standing with not a single scratch on him due to a barrier which he set up just in time. This infuriates Grimoire, who then unleashes his most powerful technique that further deteriorates the room. But to his shock, there is still not a single crack on the boy's barrier. Lloyd decides that it is now his turn for an offensive attack. He unleashes a spell that pretty much destroys the demon, and Grimoire would have been no more, if not for his immortality. After such a humbling experience, the demon agrees to be Lloyd's familiar and transforms to a tiny version of himself, giving himself the nickname of Grim. While reading in the library, Lloyd is interrupted by the entrance of his elder brother, Albert, the 2nd prince of the royal family. He invites his younger brother out for an event with a group of other guests, and the young boy is happy to accept. Their day is spent at the shooting range, where a range of targets are set up across the terrain, and Albert conjures up a tiny fireball to take them down. He does so to the applause of the observing nobles and maids who commend his talents. He then calls up young Lloyd to show off his abilities as well. Our protagonist hides Grim in the front of his shirt and takes center stage. He is well aware that all of his brothers are busy fighting for the throne, but he does not wish for any royal title. His only aim is to gain as much knowledge as is humanly possible and discover every form of magic in the world. Now, obviously, he could take down every target in the range with both his eyes blindfolded, but he does not wish to create a huge commotion about his abilities and simply decides to hit the corner of each target, just enough to turn them around. He does so, but the reaction to this accomplishment is much more reserved, particularly from the side of the nobles. However, Grim is clearly amazed at how the boy was able to use the exact same strike on every target. Albert then announces that he and the guests are returning indoors for a talk, so he is free to practice in the range for as long as he wishes. When the company has gone, Lloyd begins celebrating that he now has the complete range to himself so he can try out any technique he wants. Grim is already anxious as he is starting to become aware of his master's powers. But when Lloyd reveals that he wishes to try a double incantation spell that Grim used in the underground library, the demon is horrified. Such a charm would require 2 mouths on a single person, and the extent of damage may be too much for such a residential area. However, our hero is not to be swayed as he orders his familiar to enter his hand, where Grim's mouth suddenly pops out, which solves the issue of the 2 mouths for the double incantation. But when the demon tries the incantation for the spell, the pure power radiating from the boy is way too much for him, and Lloyd has to take control of the second mouth as well. Taking a deep breath, he begins reciting the words of the charm, and as Grim watches the magic form, he cannot believe his eyes. A young boy is using 2 schools of magic to perform a demon-level spell and doing so without any apparent difficulty. Lloyd suddenly levitates into the air as a great amount of mana is released around him and launched right into the sky, much to the amaze of the townspeople who are observing this miracle with mouths agape. Back at the castle, the nobles ask Albert why he spends such a large portion of his busy schedule with his young brother, Lloyd. Taking a sip of his tea, the prince explains that the boy's abilities are prodigal and he would prove to be useful to him one day. He even explains how Lloyd had struck each target on purpose, which further proves his skills. A noble suddenly remarks about how it has become dark outside at such an early time of the day. Apparently, Lloyd's spell has torn a hole in the sky and space is now visible through it, which is why it suddenly appears to be nighttime. Grim is awestruck while Lloyd immediately realizes what he has done and rushes to recreate the sky and cover up the hole before someone notices and realizes that he has done it. Fortunately, nobody found out that Lloyd's misplaced spell was the reason for the catastrophe, but news of a hole in the sky was printed in next day's newspaper. Lloyd pays it no heed and his attention is instead caught by an article about an adventurer who cleared a dungeon and uncovered treasure. The explorer in him rises up and he decides to set out and uncover dungeons as well. Grim reminds him that his disappearance would send shockwaves around the castle, but the boy already has a solution. He creates a clone of himself and transfers Grim's spirit inside of it so that he could take his place while he is gone. Obviously, the main issue would be Sylpha, who immediately notices even a slight change in her beloved master, but Lloyd is confident that he would be back before then. Although he is now free of the castle, Lloyd is unsure of where to find a dungeon. Fortunately, he meets an adventurer on the way by the name of Tayo, a female Q user, who agrees to team up with him for adventures. One reason for this may be the fact that he changed his appearance to that of Albert with dark hair, and his good looks immediately attracted the girl. As they begin clearing a nearby dungeon, Tayo tries to show off her strength so that Lloyd would fall for her, but the boy is way too busy collecting crystals and other objects he has never seen before. As they stop for a short break, Lloyd asks Tao if she could teach him how to use Ki, which is a breathing style that allows you to use another energy besides mana. The girl is about to mention how it takes people years to even learn the technique when she notices that the boy has actually begun to do it. She is speechless and is now sure that he is destined to be her fiancé. Once they defeat the boss of the dungeon, they approach a treasure chest, but Lloyd pulls Tayo away just in time as an axe suddenly slices at them. A demonic creature known as a lich appears, as it turns out that their challenge is not yet over. Lloyd asks Tayo what type of creature a leash is, but instead of answering, she informs him that it is time for him to leave and kicks him out of the cave, literally. Although she regrets treating him so harshly, she still assumes that he is a first-rank adventurer and would certainly face death against such a high-profile opponent. As she dodges strikes thrown by the lich, she cannot believe that such a low-level dungeon has such a dangerous boss. She has already accepted defeat in her heart, but wishes to keep the creature occupied to give time for Lloyd to escape. Meanwhile, The boy is confused as to why he was suddenly thrown out of the cave, but does not wish to return back in case there was a genuine reason why Tayo did not want him around. Although her kick had immense strength and any other human would have several broken bones by now, our protagonist has already formed a barrier around himself which softens the contact when he eventually comes to a halt. He then tries to contact Grimm for an update on what is going on at the castle, but no reply is received, which worries him even more. Back in the cave, Tao is at her last ounce of strength and she appears to be clearly battered. Surprisingly, the Lich starts talking and informs the girl that he has devoured many adventurers with a similar technique of ki like hers. So he has no interest in her ability. However, his interest is piqued by Lloyd, who had sensed his attack near the treasure chest and reacted in seconds, which proves that he has skills that the creature would like to possess. Hearing Lloyd's name suddenly triggers something inside Tayo as she realizes that she actually has something to fight for. Getting back to her feet, she unleashes the entire extent of her Q technique and launches a series of punches at the Lich, who creates a barrier around himself. However, such is Tao's power that she even manages to break through the barrier, although at the cost of her entire stamina. As she falls to the ground in defeat, the Lich declares his amusement that the limit of the girl's power is equal to his finger worth strength. He summons a crystal shard to finish off the girl and Tayo would have been done for, if not for the sudden appearance of Lloyd, who creates a barrier around her and himself, thus blocking the attack. Stepping out of his barrier with a smile, our hero announces that he does not have a lot of time, so he needs to finish this up quickly. Although he is faced by such a formidable foe, Lloyd decides to go ahead and practice his QI technique during their fight. So while the Lich is flinging crystal shards after shards at him, our boy is peacefully sitting in his personal barrier, taking long, deep breaths and trying to unlock the key. The Lich is astounded that his attacks are having no effect on the barricade until Lloyd himself breaks out of it so that he could take deeper breaths out in the open. The demon now tries to attack the boy directly, but he is way too quick and dodges every strike before it makes contact. Lloyd eventually finds the right combination between his mana and ki and launches a strike at the Lich, which is way too weak to cause any proper damage. However, after a few more tries, he finally conjures up the perfect strike that cuts through the demon and its barrier, granting him victory at last. Having just seen Lloyd at his best, Tayo is lost for words as she realizes that she is in the presence of a true magician. To their disappointment, when they open the treasure chest, they are met with the sight of an old rusted dagger that would not look out of place at a vendor stall. However, Lloyd notices traces of mana on its blade and decides to keep it. They then escape the dungeon before it collapses on them. Having cleared this new experience, Lloyd now returns back home where he is met with the sight of an injured Grimm. The poor demon, with grunts and groans, reveals that Silpha had challenged him to a sparring battle and beaten the living daylights out of him, and then even had the audacity to question his combat ability. The boy comforts him while hiding his smile. As the days pass, Lloyd's new source of interest are the mana inscriptions on blades. Through days of research, he learns how to make mana of his own and collects the appropriate materials that are required. Silver coins that are collected from his father, oil from Silpha, and a handful of weapons from Albert's soldiers. Once the liquid mana is complete, he begins writing magical inscriptions on various weapons with it, but due to their complexity, most of them break before completion. It takes days, but our protagonist is a determined fellow and he eventually discovers the perfect combination. Lloyd then returns the upgraded weapons to their owners and requests Albert if he could observe them during combat. The second prince, who has just received a mission for a monster hunt from the king, agrees to take his younger brother along, much to the young boy's delight, along with Silpha, who always accompanies her beloved prince. Lloyd and Albert set forth for the monster hunt. Most of the journey is spent catching up on some Ziz for our protagonist, who wakes up to the sight of the forest ahead of them. He can barely conceal his excitement since this is one of those rare times when he has been allowed to leave the castle and does not have to hide to set out for an adventure. Albert notices Silpha watching his brother fondly and makes a sly comment about how she might have different feelings for him, but his words are cut short when the maid is about to unsheath her sword, a huge reminder for the second prince that he will have to hold his tongue around her. The group is suddenly ambushed by numerous monsters, which catches them all by surprise, except for Lloyd, who had been practicing a Kiwai technique, which allowed him to sense any movement in surrounding areas. However, these are minor creatures, and a single strike from Lloyd's enchanted weapons that are wielded by the soldiers is enough to send them all to monster afterlife. A few remain, and seizing an opportunity to get to the royal family, begin charging at the carriage, but are dealt with by an always energetic Tayo, who jumps out of the nearby trees. She explains that she had sensed a key user nearby and came upon the group in the hope that she might find her beloved Robert. She stares at Lloyd with suspicion due to his likeness to Robert, which stirs jealousy in the heart of Silpha, who begins questioning Tayo's purpose in the forest. Acting as the peacemaker, Albert invites the girl to join them until that night, when they would set up camp. Dusk soon falls and the group takes a rest for the night. Lloyd realizes his mistake in using the QI technique since there is a possibility that his cover might be blown, but cannot turn it off now since it would arouse even more suspicion. To make matters worse, there is a constant argument between Silpha and Tayo as the two jealous women come to loggerheads at the campsite. A few of the perverted soldiers actually gather to watch this fight between the attractive women, but are immediately knocked out by them. Lloyd is informed by both Albert and then Grimm about what a hit he is with the ladies, but the boy does not appear pleased with this information. Clearly, his only aims for this adventure are to derive peace from a foreign area and to gather new knowledge. Tayo discloses that her job in this forest is to fix up an old shrine on a nearby hill. Grimm suddenly goes quiet when he catches sight of the shrine and tries to remember where he has seen it before. Meanwhile, Albert suggests that Tao stay with them until sunrise, since her detection skills would come in handy in case the monster tries to ambush them while they are sleeping. Almost as if the mere mention of the creature summoned it, an enormous wolf-like being jumps out of the forest and stares at the campers with rabid eyes and huge drops of saliva running down its mouth. Albert steps forward and summons an immense fireball which he flings at the monster, immediately incinerating it, leaving behind only its charred remains. The group erupts in applause, but the prince is humble as always and gives credit to Lloyd's enchanted weapon, which has upgraded his magical abilities as well. While they are all celebrating, Grimm informs his master that he recalls where he has seen that shrine before. It is where a powerful demon has been trapped. Suddenly, the remains of the werewolf gets back to its feet and opens its mouth, out of which a horrifying demon makes itself known, revealing his name to be Pazuzu. He announces that the group has committed a great crime by crossing paths with him, and now their only destination is death. Not only does the charred werewolf regenerate itself, but a number of other monsters suddenly appear and begin attacking the campers. Despite the strength of their weapons, these creatures heal themselves within seconds after every strike, which puts them on the brink of immortality. Silpha orders Lloyd to hide behind a pile of barrels, where the boy receives information from Grimm on what kind of demon Pazuzu is. Apparently, he is using mana transmutation, through which he is controlling the creatures and regenerating them whenever they get hit. Our protagonist's eyes light up and he begs Grimm to teach him mana transmutation right at that moment. The demon is caught by surprise, but agrees to do so. Meanwhile, Silpha's enraged by taunting words said by Pazuzu about her master, and she squares up to the demon, thinking that she is just a regular mortal and maid. He charges at her, fully intending to bite through her frail body. But Silpha is way too fast and slices apart the creature's feet, leaving it limbless. This results in the other werewolves regenerating much more slowly, giving her comrades an advantage as well. Having not had enough, the cocky demon then goes as far as to trigger Silpha with more insults directed at Lloyd. The maid shows no emotion and, grabbing an enchanted sword from a nearby soldier, she teleports into the werewolf's mouth right next to Pazuzu and slices the entire creature in half. While all this is going on, Lloyd is in a world of his own. Having learned how to project mana out of his body, he then gives it color, shape, and even its own distinct scent. Grimm watches this in amazement since it is supposed to require years of practice, but his master manages to master it in mere minutes. Not only that, but he actually has enough stamina to then ask his familiar for the next step. Talk about an anime filled with op characters. Utterly worn out and defeated, Pazuzu falls to the ground with Silpha standing at his head, telling him to give up. However, the demon still has an evil smile on his face and starts exhaling a purplish smoke out of his mouth that soon spreads across the entire terrain. Prince Albert and the soldiers take one whiff of this smoke and immediately pass out. Slowly getting to his feet, the demon has grown a few feet in a matter of seconds. It is evident that he is powered up since a pair of wings are sprouting out of his back. His voice filled with rage, he blames Silpha for the breakdown of his master plan, which he spent centuries planning whilst locked up in the shrine. He strikes the girl with such a force that she is sent flying across the nearby lake. It could have been much worse if not for the interference of Tayo, who comes to her rival's rescue. Silpha begins to cough blood and is unable to muster up enough energy to even escape, as she passes out seconds after. Pazuzu's attention is now on Tayo, on whom his miasma smoke has no effect. Apparently, her key breathing technique makes the smoke ineffective and allows her to fight without any weakness. She gets fired up due to the demon's taunts and unleashes a special move known as the Thunderquake Pulse, which drains most of her energy. Unfortunately, it hardly does any damage and the girl is now at a clear disadvantage, as is seen when Pazuzu sends his minion Wolf Bear to eat her up. The most she is able to manage is holding the creature's mouth open, but eventually her strength gives way and she is swallowed. Having dealt with one out of two of his opponents, Pazuzu now focuses on Silpha, who is unconscious. He aims to use his miasma to gain control of her mind and add her to his minion army, which he has done with the bear wolves as well. He had actually killed their parents and replaced their memories in the creatures' minds with his own fantasies so that they would serve him. The demon suddenly catches sight of Lloyd, who is busy playing in the lake with Grimm by his side. He first throws some insults in Grimm's direction since he can recognize that he is a demon and is apparently serving a human boy. Then, surprised that his miasma smoke had no effect on the kid, Pazuzu launches a group of his bear wolves towards the duo, but Lloyd has perfected mana transmutation and uses that to his advantage. Just as the creatures are about to attack him, he switches their memories from those of bloodlust and anger to positive thoughts. Their attitude suddenly changes and they actually become quite docile, opting to cuddle with the boy instead of sinking their teeth into him. He even convinces the bear wolf, who ate Teo, to spit her back out. Pazuzu tries to use his miasma smoke to win over the creatures again, but they have now recognized him as their enemy and begin attacking him as a pack. However, the demon is way too powerful and eventually beats them down. Realizing that Lloyd truly is a great sorcerer, he decides to utilize the full extent of his mana, which begins to radiate out of his body. The dark red energy kills any greenery in the area, and the demon is confident that he has sufficiently scared the boy. However, Lloyd is barely stirred and actually asks Grimm what it would take to kill a demon since they are known to be immortal. The familiar discloses that it has never happened before, so he could not say for certain. With a grin, the boy then begins unleashing his own aura that soon takes over everything around them and actually makes Pazuzu's aura fade out in comparison. The demon can barely believe what is happening and tries to escape. But Lloyd has created a maze, and at every corner is a barrier that tries to imprison Pazuzu. While the demon uses every ounce of his energy to evade capture, Lloyd is now full out giggling and enchanting spell after spell without any incantations, which is nothing short of miraculous. Grimm then fuses into his hand, and together they form a spectral barrier that eventually closes around Pazuzu, leaving the demon at the boy's mercy. Knowing that his life might be coming to an end, he tries to win over Lloyd's favor by promising him any treasure in the world in return for his freedom. However, our protagonist is dead set upon experimenting what it would take to kill a demon, summoning numerous enchantments. He sets the barrier ablaze with different colored spells that makes the ball look familiar to a fireworks show. Barely 5 minutes have passed since his enchantment, after which he brings it to an end and opens the barrier, which reveals an extremely charred Pazuzu within an inch of his life. He can barely utter a complete sentence before he is reduced to ash, and Grimm inhales his mana for future use. By now, the rest of the group begin to gain consciousness, and Lloyd rushes to them and reveals that the magician Robert suddenly showed up and slayed the demon. Teo is love-struck when she hears this and rushes into the forest in search of her one true love. On their return to the castle, they are all welcomed back with laurels and a grand celebration. The king himself summons Albert and Lloyd and thanks them for their contribution in making the town a better place. The second prince discloses that Lloyd's enchanted weapons made their battle much easier and that he should be included in line for the throne since his abilities would make him a worthy future king. The entire throne room is shocked at this declaration, and all eyes are on the boy as the king asks Lloyd if he would like to join the line of successors for the throne. However, with a hand to his chest, our hero politely declines this invitation and then runs back out to play with a friendly bear wolf that followed them home. A true lesson in humility, having named his pet bear Wolf Shiro. Lloyd's new challenge is to train and domesticate it just like an ordinary pet. Although it is 4 times the size of our protagonist, the boy actually manages to teach it to perform simple tricks such as fetch or to move on command. But the boy is not satisfied with just this and wishes to train it to fulfill complex commands as well. While showing off Shiro to Silpa and informing her of his problem, she discloses that she has the perfect person to solve his issue. Coincidentally, Lloyd thinks of the exact same person and they go to visit his elder sister Elise, the 6th princess of the kingdom. Her tower is really a sight to behold, with all types of animals calling the place home, ranging from various birds, reptiles, and even crocodiles that are living together in harmony. Catching sight of her younger brother, Elise rushes down the stairs and embraces him with a tight hug, which would have shattered any normal human's ribcage. Silpha's jealous tendencies once again kick in, and she shows her possessive side, trying to convince her master that his sister would probably not have any answers. However, he still wishes to give it a shot and shows off Shiro to Elise, who immediately begins cuddling the bear wolf, and the creature clearly enjoys it. Our protagonist then asks her if she could show off any of her monsters, to which a higher breed of bear wolf named Liru suddenly shows up. Lloyd is surprised that Liru was actually able to appear without detection by his QI breathing technique, and that Elise did not even need to call her out. He requests his sister to teach him this technique so that he could communicate with Shiro as well. Elise smiles and reveals that the only source for such power is love, which catches all the listeners by shock. She demonstrates this by summoning all the animals in the tower over to her, and within seconds, they are all gathered around the girl. However, Lloyd recognizes that his sister is subconsciously using mana to connect with each and every animal, and communicates with them accordingly. He tries to do so as well, And after a bit of practice, he is able to connect with Shiro, and soon enough, the bear wolf is doing high jumps in the tower that would make any Olympic athlete proud, with yet another technique added to his experience. Lloyd makes his way back to the castle along with Silpha. The maid is excited to spend her afternoon sparring with her young master, but her plans are foiled by the appearance of Prince Albert, who informs his younger brother that he needs to meet someone. This certain individual is the third prince, Diane. Apparently, he got news of Lloyd's success with the enchanted blades, and since he is a blacksmith by profession, he wishes to observe the boy making the spells with his own eyes. Our hero is happy to oblige and demonstrates his skills in the forgery, instantly winning Diane's approval. His elder brother then reveals that he wishes to forge an enchanted blade that is able to enhance the use of magic even for those that do not have the ability, such as himself. A new creation such as this catches Lloyd's intrigue, and he agrees to help out. Once the shape of the sword has been set out, the boy is supposed to write out an incantation of his choice on the red-hot metal. However, a fire-based spell known as Pyrrolland's Incinus is way too strong for the metal, and it breaks apart. Lloyd tries to abbreviate it since that would reduce its severity, but to no avail. Upon further inspection, he finds out his spell is not the problem, but the liquid mana he is using to write out the incantation. Apparently, Diane bought the cheap kind, which lacks the magical qualities for a truly powerful weapon. The boy's only shot is to go dungeon hunting once again and collect a chest which would add enough magic in the mana for it to be useful again. Surprisingly, Silpha has this exact same idea and accompanies her master to the guild, where they would search up any available dungeons that could be cleared. Lloyd finds out something new here. Apparently, Silpha used to be an adventurer and a very skilled one at that. Legends of her battles are still told at the guild, and her title Silver Blader is spoken with fear to that day. Unfortunately, since she has not gone adventuring in a long time, she is required to re-register, which would set her level at a mere rank C. Lloyd is still a low-level adventurer, so he would need to be accompanied by at least a level B for his accomplishment to be accepted by the guild. Fortunately for him, Tao shows up and reveals that she is a level ranker and would be delighted to join Lloyd on his adventure. Despite Silpha's initial hesitation, she agrees to this arrangement on the condition that she comes along with them. Such an overpowered group was never going to face any issue clearing a mere dungeon, and they are able to retrieve a chest and bring it back to the kingdom. Here, thanks to Diane's help, the enchanted sword is finally made, and a test run at the shooting range proves that it's the real deal. Later that night, Lloyd lays in bed and feels satisfied with such a positive day. However, his QI technique continues to bother him about a strange being in the yard of the castle. On closer inspection, it is revealed to be a hooded individual that seems to be observing the boy from afar. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe for part 7, and make sure to check out the next anime video.